Brentford are a team that have managed to become an established Premier League team. This is down to the job that current head coach Thomas Frank has done since he assumed the position in 2018. Thomas Frank is a coach that's developed a style of football that he likes his teams to play. They are known for being aggressive and often on the front foot, even if that leaves them vulnerable in defence. He likes to play a 3-5-2 system that builds from a solid base at the back. The wide players provide the team with outballs down the flanks, and they like to move the ball at pace to the front players. The 5-man midfield can transition to a 5-man defence, and they often try to turn the ball over quickly. Thomas Frank in recent years has also shown himself to be shrewd in the market. He often targets players that have top flight experience at other clubs, but are still young enough to be developed at Brentford. The likes of Mikael Damsgaard and Kevin Schade are good examples. He also likes to invest in local players with potential, such as Keane Lewis Potter, Finn Stevens and Nathan Collins, all fit in the mould. So with all that in mind, I've decided that with the 23-24 season now coming to a close and Brentford having a poor campaign, it'd be a good time to take the reins at Brentford to continue doing Thomas Frank's work beginning in the 24-25 season. So we take over the club on July the 1st, 2024 and are welcomed into the job. We have a media prediction that puts us around mid-table in 11th place, a transfer budget of around 9 million and facilities that will need upgrading to compete at the highest level quickly. We are left with a starting 11 that is about to be depleted. The obvious two players here are David Raya, who will probably have his loan deal made permanent by Arsenal, and Ivan Toney, who in real life has been edging for a move away from the club following his ban for his off-the-field activities. Of the players left though, we have a good base to build on. The game has set us up in a 4-3-3 formation, but to be honest, having looked at Frank's style of football, this will become a 3-5-2. We have good wide players in Henry and Rosalev. Centre-back is strong with Pinnock, Mee, Adja and Collins, who isn't pictured. We will likely need a defensive midfielder, but the current players in the slots will do a job early in the save. The two wide slots will disappear in the 3-5-2 system, but I do feel the club will need one more striker to compete with the players already at the club. The board have made it clear what they want from us. They would like to play entertaining, attacking possession football. They need us to work within the wage budget whilst also growing the club's reputation. This is how our 3-5-2 is going to look. With the wing-backs still providing us with outballs, the midfield three will be required to protect the back three, whilst the two strikers work together to unlock the defences. In terms of squad depth, as was mentioned before, I think that we are sound when it comes to the defensive part of the team. We will need a defensive midfielder to help stabilise us in the middle, and we will look to add a striker to replace Ivan Toney. As predicted, Season 1 would kick off with some big transfers. Firstly, Arsenal would activate the clause in David Raya's loan deal to make it a permanent transfer. This would be followed up by Ivan Toney getting his wish to move away from the club. Even though, in real life, he wants to go to Liverpool or Real Madrid, FM24 decided that it would be the Middle East for him, as he moves to Al Qadsiya. Another player to leave the club would be Matthias Jorgensen, with the Danish defender moving to Standard Liège. The first of the players joining the club is a player who has an agreement to join the club in real life. This is Igor Thiago, and he will be a replacement for Ivan Toney. The Brazilian joins the club from Bruges. Next up, we would sign reinforcements at left back. Junior Firpo was placed on the market, and we would only pay £8 million for the former Barcelona man. Next player to arrive is a striker. This is a young German, Nelson Wiper. He comes from Mainz in Germany, where he's getting himself a reputation for scoring goals, and he's the perfect competition for the front line at this stage. Next up is another German, and the long-term replacement for both Raya and Flecken. This is Dennis Simon. The young German keeper is touted as a wonder kid, so it made sense to make the investment in him. The final signing of the season was the defensive midfielder that I was looking for. Sticking with Frank's philosophy of buying young players with top-flight experience, we would go and raid Red Bull Salzburg for Lucas Gorner Duath. So with the signings complete, let's look at how we got on in Season 1. In the Premier League, we would hit the ground running as we blazed a trail for the first 7 games. Things would change though as we hit a tricky patch in October and only won once in the next 7. Things didn't get any better around Christmas either as we struggled to the turn of the year. After that December slump, we would pick back up and win 5 on the bounce, en route to an up and down run of form to finish the season. In the Carabao Cup, we would beat Colchester, Everton and Accrington before a quarter-final exit to Manchester United after a penalty shootout. The FA Cup though would be where we played some of our best football. We would need a third-round replay to beat Notts Forest before sweeping aside Watford, Luton, Spurs and Norwich to reach the final, where we would claim the first silverware of the save with a 1-0 victory in the final. That would mean in the first season we would go on and finish 5th in the Premier League, scoring 72 points and qualifying for the Champions League. We also added the FA Cup to make it a special first season at the club. Thiago would have a good first campaign at the club. The Brazilian would end up scoring 10 goals from his 15 starts. Lucas Gorner Duath also settled in well at the club. He made 12 appearances in all competitions, but it was Nelson Wiper who would stand out, scoring 14 goals in his first season. Going into season number 2, we would be rewarded for our success as the board grant us a transfer budget of £88 million. In terms of the playing team and planning for season 2, we will look to strengthen in certain areas. I am happy with the players that you can see in the tactic, but feel I do need more strength in depth in midfield. I will also look to bring in another defender and possibly a new striker. To start us off in Season 2, we have a number of players departing the club, starting with Mads Roslev. He wasn't really a player I was desperate to move on, but an offer from Al Ain meant that he was on the move. Joining him out in the Middle East would be Jon Wissa. He had played well for me in Season 1, but once again the lure of the Middle East cash got that deal done. That meant we had a load of cash and I tried to spend as much of it as I could. The first player to come in was Isaac Johannesson, a solid young Icelandic midfielder who has the potential to run the midfield. Up next is a player who fits the mould of being young and local, as we picked up Hull City defender Jacob Greaves. The next player to come in is another young English player, as we picked up Jayden Mekoma. The final signing of Season 2 has the potential to be a game changer. For some reason, Manchester City decided to list Julian Alvarez for £75 million, and despite having to destroy the salary structure to sign him, we managed to get the deal done. So with the transfers complete, how did we do in Season 2? The season would kick off this time in the Community Shield, but sadly for us, it wouldn't be a happy return to Wembley, as we would end up losing to Spurs on penalties. In the Premier League, we'd have a more stop-start season than last time around. We'd win a couple of games and then drop points here and there. This would be a theme that would continue for most of the season. The main highlight though was a 7-match winning streak around the turn of the year. In the Carabao Cup, we would beat Brighton and Southampton en route to the quarter-finals, where unfortunately we would be beaten by Leeds United. Despite being the holders of the trophy, we couldn't repeat our success in the FA Cup, this time beating Crewe, Fulham and Wolves before we were paired off against Man City in the quarter-finals, where we would lose 3-2 in extra time. In the Champions League, we would be humbly reminded that we were there probably a season too early. An impressive early win was quickly forgotten, as we'd win only once and draw twice in the 8 games to go out with a whimper. Despite our failings in the Champions League, we would go on to qualify for it again the next season by finishing 3rd in the Premier League. This time we would score 77 points, but still finish 12 behind Manchester City. Nelson Wiper would go on to be the star of the season. The German scored an impressive 23 goals in his second campaign. Isaac Johannesson had a solid start to life at Brentford as he made 24 starts, and Julian Alvarez would have an injury-hit season, but that still saw him score 17 goals from 34 games. Going into Season 3, we now have a transfer budget of £54 million to improve the team to a Champions League standard. To get the team there, I think I'm going to need to improve a number of key areas. Centre-back is an area that could do with looking at, as I think we currently have good Premier League defenders, but need one that is a step up in class. Right-back is another position where we can improve, and once again, another central midfielder could help with creativity and providing a shield for our defence. The start of Season 3 would begin with Ben Mee announcing the end of his footballing career. Having been at Brentford since 2022, he'll be missed in the dressing room. Also leaving the club this season would be Mikhail Damsgaard, who moves to Nantes in France, and Thiago, who despite having a good first season, never really found his feet in the Premier League, and Mark Vlakken has moved back to the Netherlands to join Feyenoord after the emergence of Dennis Simon. Joining the club for Season 3 would be Zeno de Bast. The Belgian wonder kid would add a little bit of flair to our defensive line and will help cover the Ben Mee gap in the future. The next player in would be Keiki from Almeria, a solid, reliable squad player who can help out as defensive cover. James McAtee joins on a free transfer from Manchester City. Joe Bellingham comes in to add another option to our midfield or attacking line. Unsure of where his best position is, but definitely a player I am happy to have on board. And finally, Jay Stansfield joins from Fulham to give us a rotation option up front. This one also helps us out with the homegrown quotas and the registration rules for UEFA competitions. So with the transfer business done, let's look at how we got on. In the Premier League, we would have another season where we would struggle to get big runs of form in the first half of the year. We would start off well and then suffer a dip in form. In the run-up to Christmas though, we would pick up 7 wins from 10 games. After the turn of the year, we would play some good football and continue pretty much in the same vein of form as the first half of the season. In the Carabao Cup, we would have a brilliant campaign, starting off with wins against Fleetwood, Millwall and Wigan before we booked a place at Wembley with a 2-legged win over Southampton. In the final, we would go on and beat Spurs 4-0 to claim another trophy in Season 3. The FA Cup would start off in good style, as wins against Stoke, Fulham and Wigan saw us progress to the quarter-finals, where unfortunately we'd be beaten by Everton. After last season's woeful performance in the Champions League, we would do a lot better this time around. We would win 5 of the 8 league phase games before playing against Sturm Graz in the knockout playoff and winning 5-2 on aggregate. Then Real Sociedad, who we beat 4-1 over 2 games. This set up a quarter-final against Bayern Munich, but unfortunately that proved a step too far for us. This meant overall in Season 3 we would finish in second place in the Premier League, scoring a total of 83 points and only finishing behind Spurs. We also added the Carabao Cup to the trophy cabinet, completing the domestic cup set in the save. Nelson Wiper would continue to be a standout performer for the team. The German scored 24 goals from 30 starts on the season. Julian Alvarez would have a better time of it this time around, managing to make 43 starts and bagged himself 28 goals. Finn Stevens would be the player to have a breakout season. After becoming the starting right back, he would chip in with 15 assists across the season. Isaac Johannesson would take another step forward in his development as he took on a larger starting role in the midfield, and Joe Bellingham would also have a solid first season as he would net 8 goals in all competitions. Going into Season 4, we now have a transfer budget of £68 million to strengthen the team. In terms of the squad, we have already took a step forward this season and now will look to continue to add young, talented players to the first team. With me retiring and the 2 younger players coming in, we might have to look to add a bit of experience in defence to solidify the backline. Season 4 would begin with a few surprise moves. Firstly, Ethan Pinnock would make a move to Al Ettifaq. Matthias Jensen would ask for a move and he would end up at Atletico Madrid. With the players that we signed being strong first teamers, there really wasn't room for Kevin Schade, who would go back to Germany to move to Schalke. And finally, Junior Firpo would agree a deal that saw him move to Al Ittihad. The first of the new arrivals for the season will be Lewis Hall. The young Englishman was somehow available for transfer by Newcastle, and we decided to snap him up. Next to join the club was Jurrien Timber. He too was made available by Ajax, and after a bit of back and forth between the clubs, managed to tempt him to join our club. The next player to arrive was a player that caused a bit of excitement from the fans, as we signed Italian wonder kid Edoardo Bove. The former Manchester City player returns to England to play in our midfield. The final signing for the season would be another Englishman who has a big reputation, as we went and signed Levi Colwill from Chelsea. After looking around for a centre-back, he was the one that fit the bill. So with the transfer business putting us in a strong position now, let's see how we got on. In the Premier League, we would have a fantastic first half of the season, with the only 3 blots on our book being a loss to Everton and draws against Man United and Arsenal. After the turn of Christmas, we would continue to be in brilliant form, as we would win 14 of the last 18 games, only dropping points 4 times. Our stay in the Carabao Cup would be short and sweet this season, as we surrendered our trophy in the 3rd round after being drawn against Manchester City. In the FA Cup, we would have a brilliant run, which saw us beat Yeovil, Middlesbrough, Chelsea and Norwich, en route to the final, where sadly we would miss out, losing 3-1 to Arsenal at Wembley. In the Champions League though, something magical was about to happen. After a league phase which saw us scrape through after some up and down matches, we would embark on a run that was epic. Firstly, we would defeat Chelsea in the knockout round, then Spurs in the round of 16, before a tie against City, which would end 3-2 on aggregate. That would set us up against last season's conquerors Bayern. This time we would beat them over 2 legs to reach the final, where we would come up against Barcelona. We would then play some of the best football of the save to topple the mighty Spanish club 3-1 in the final, and we brought the Champions League to Brentford. That would mean in Season 4 we would do a historic double, as we win the Premier League and add the Champions League to the trophy collection. Julian Alvarez would be one of the stars of the season. The Argentine would score 21 goals from 47 games. Aaron Hickey would step up in terms of his assists, as he provided 12 from the wing-back positions. Jurrien Timber would help us to solidify the defence alongside Levi Colwill, who slotted in seamlessly at centre-back. Edoardo Bove would have himself a busy season, as the Italian made 53 starts in all competitions, as he became one of the first names on the team sheet. Going into the final season of the save, we would now have a transfer budget of 58 million to try and help us defend the Premier League and the Champions League. In terms of the squad, we have pretty much reached the point now where we are strong everywhere. The weakness in our defence was solved in Season 4, and as we progress into the final season, I think we can now focus on trying to consolidate the squad. Season 5 would begin with some player departures, the first of which was Yarmouk. He would move to Spain and join Valencia. The other player to leave would be James McAtee. We picked him up on a free transfer, and then we sold him to Leicester for £22 million. In terms of the players that would arrive in Season 5, the first would be goal machine Benjamin Šeško. The tall, rangy striker would join us from Red Bull Leipzig. Up next, we added Fikayo Tomori to our already improved defensive line. Tyler Morton would join as a backup and also help with squad registrations. We picked up Elias Gellert from Brighton to strengthen the options at wing-back, and the final acquisition of the save would be Paul Wanner, who joins the club after a spell at Leverkusen. That completes the squad and the transfers. Let's see how we got on in the final season. So the season began with the Community Shield, where we would manage to beat Arsenal 2-1 at Wembley. Up next was the Super Cup, and we would add that to our trophy collection as we beat Manchester United 2-0 in Frankfurt. In the Premier League, we would have a brilliant season. In the first half of the campaign, we would only drop points 3 times, which left us in a brilliant standing for the second half of the season. The form did inevitably come more varied, but we had a strong overall season in the Premier League once again. In the Carabao Cup, we would have an excellent run starting in the 3rd round against Burnley. We would go on to beat Luton, Forest and Stoke before playing Spurs in the final and triumphing 1-0. Our FA Cup run was not as impressive though. We had wins in round 3, 4 and 5 before coming up against Manchester City in the quarter-finals where we would lose 4-2. As defending champions in the Champions League, there was a lot riding on the team to repeat the feat. Sadly, it wasn't meant to be, but we did put up a brilliant fight. The group phase would only see us fail to win twice before we'd go on and beat Chelsea in the round of 16 and Juventus in the quarter-finals before we were finally knocked out against Real Madrid in the semis. This meant in the final season we would go on to lift 4 trophies as we won the Premier League, the Super Cup, the League Cup and the Community Shield. At the end of the save we would leave the club in a brilliant position financially, as the club has a budget of £149 million and they will allow the new manager to spend £134 million of it. In terms of the squad, we stayed true to the 3-5-2 system and this is how it will finish up. Simon developed really well to be a number 1 goalkeeper, a defensive trio of Colwill, Adger and Tamori, the wing-backs being Henry and Gellert, a 3-man midfield of Johannesson, Warner and Bove, with a strike partnership of Alvarez and Šeško. Dennis Simon is now valued up to £67 million and has developed really well. Tamori had a brilliant first season at the club, stepping in as a powerhouse at the back. Rico Henry has gone on to be a club legend, already receiving a testimonial and going on to play 348 times for the club. Gellert settled in well. He would provide 12 assists in his first season. Bove has proven himself to be a standout in the team. The Italian has now been at the club a while and has really stamped his authority on the midfield. Julian Alvarez has probably been the signing of the save though. He has now played in 117 games and managed to score 71 goals across his time at the club. This could have probably been even more if he wasn't slightly injury prone. Finally, Benjamin Šeško would have a stellar first season as the striker would go on to score 32 goals in 34 games, cementing his position as a goal machine. So after 5 years at the club, let's have a look at what was won. We successfully managed to win 2 Premier League titles. We won the FA Cup, 2 League Cups, a Community Shield, a Super Cup and the big one. For the first time in the club's history, we gained qualification for the Champions League and went on to win it. Brentford are a brilliant club and there are some question marks around Thomas Frank's future as a manager. If he stays and continues his work, I wish him every success. This has been a fun series to do and I've thoroughly enjoyed my time at Brentford.